What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have some things that we're going to go ahead and get right into today. We have some new news on that, what was an area of interest off the Carolina coast that we're going to talk about. And then we're going to look at potential areas for development as the MJO starts to approach the region in the next few days, and we start to see those probabilities increase. And we're seeing some ensemble pickup a little bit in a few areas that we're going to want to talk about as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into it right now. Let's go ahead and start with the NHC. This is what they had this morning. What was that area of interest now is a 0% chance. I believe they took it off their website. I haven't refreshed this just yet, just so we could read this. And so I can explain to you why they took it off, because it wasn't because, it was weak or anything like that. It was for a completely different reason. Showers and thunderstorms located over the Florida Peninsula and southeastern U.S. coast, the northwest Bahamas, and adjacent Atlantic and Gulf waters are associated with a broad trough of low pressure. A non-tropical low pressure area is forecast to form from this system on Thursday, but it is becoming increasingly likely that this development will occur inland over South Carolina and North Carolina. As a result, the lowest chance of acquiring subtropical or tropical characteristics have diminished. Regardless of development, heavy rainfall could cause some flash flooding along portions of the southeastern United States coast today and on Thursday. No chance of development anymore right there. And like it said right there, the reason why is not because it's going to dissipate or the conditions are bad or anything like that. It's because of A, the system is actually going to be developing on land and not over water, and B, this is not tropical in nature. So it's going to basically be mid-latitude in nature. It's going to have fronts attached to it. We talked about this yesterday. Tropical cyclones do not have fronts attached to it, while mid-latitude cyclones do. In fact, that's the reason mid-latitude cyclones are cold-cored, and that's also the reason why tropical cyclones are warm-cored and all of that. And if you want to know what cold core versus warm core is, the best way I can describe it to you is tropical cyclones get their strength from warm water and evaporation and all of that stuff. How mid-latitude cyclones get their intensification is mainly through updrafts, downdrafts, fronts, forcing mechanisms, and all of that stuff. And as you can see, we just refreshed the page. Tropical activity is not expected during the next 7 days. So that's pretty much the general gist of what we have going on according to the National Hurricane Center as of 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So with that being said, okay, we're looking at this now. There's not really much going on for the next little while. What's going to potentially pop off? What's the first area of interest, and what's the first potential named system going to be? Where is it going to be at, and when will it be? Well, we can kind of pull it a few strings here and show you maybe where it's going to be based on what conditions that we're going to be expecting. So in order to do that, we need to do an analysis and kind of do a deep dive into what conditions we're looking at, as well as a few regions and a few climatological parameters as to what we're potentially looking at as well in terms of development. So we're going to want to take some time to do that. Let's go ahead and start with the obvious one, which is the global sea surface temperatures right here. Sea surface temperatures, they have continued to update. The Gulf is continuing to warm at a pretty alarming rate. We're already at a couple of areas of 29 plus degrees Celsius, which is 84 plus degrees Fahrenheit for those of you living in the United States, across parts of the Bay of Campeche, as well as near the Loop Current right here. What we're noticing is going to be happening is we're going to see a bit of a high pressure ridge that's going to be developing over here, and we can actually go ahead and look at the upper dynamics of this and look at the height anomalies right here and show you what we're potentially looking at. So basically, we have a ridge pattern that's going to be forming over much of the Gulf right here for the next few days. Yes, there's a bit of a trough that moves through, but then that ridge starts to come back. And what you're going to see going forward from here is ultimately you're going to see more warming. And because typically higher heights are equated with warmer temperatures, you're going to see more rapid warming going on over the next couple of weeks or so, especially as we get to late June into early July, when things really start to turn up in much of the Atlantic Ocean. So that's what we're looking at in terms of sea surface temperature right here. We're already starting to see the effects of that right now, so we're going to want to pay attention to it. Other areas in the Gulf, we're looking at more 28 degrees Celsius areas that are starting to form outside of the loop current and outside the Florida coast as well, and outside the Bay of Campeche, and more the deeper areas of the Gulf that we're paying attention to. And then we're looking at a pretty wide area of 27 plus degrees Celsius, which is about 80 degrees for those of you tuning in from the United States. And then moving on further south, you're looking at the Caribbean. You are seeing some more 29s and 30 degrees Celsius, or 84s and 86 degrees Fahrenheit waters popping up around Cuba and those areas. As well, 28 degrees Celsius is starting to expand a bit further to the east. We're going to want to pay attention to that. 27 expands all the way to the Lesser Antilles. Not too concerned about it. That's to be expected. And then you're also seeing the MDR. You're noticing the MDR is cooling off a little bit as some more of these tropical waves move over. That in itself doesn't really tell too much right there. And you may think, oh, it's going to weaken. Oh, we're going to see less tropical cyclones. That's not the concern I actually have. The concern I actually have with this is these tropical cyclones are going to organize slower. They're going to develop slower. And slower development means further to the west and further and closer to the to land over here. That's not a good sign if you do not want land-based hurricanes, ladies and gentlemen, especially as you go into late July, early August, into September, when hurricane season really ramps up. That is stuff you do not want to see. You typically, if you want a hurricane to go out to sea, you're going to want to develop as soon as possible and allow for the ridge to completely collapse and allow for it to drift out. But if you see SST maps like this where the cooler waters are further to the east, it's going to take more time to develop, and it probably won't develop maybe until it gets to maybe the middle part of the MDR or the western third of the MDR. That is especially concerning for the Lesser Antilles right here and much of the Caribbean. So that's something we're going to have to pay attention to. And those water temperatures, like I said, are going to continue to warm up, but also you're going to notice the ocean heat content is going to start turning up as well. We have this actually hasn't been updated. I'm going to go ahead and go onto Yoshi's site, see if we can get the latest OHC maps from right here and just kind of give a general idea as to what we're getting. If not, then we can go pull up the University of Miami website. That won't be too big of an issue with that. Okay, let's go ahead and pull up OHC map Miami, and we'll go ahead and show you that right now just to kind of give you the idea of what's going on. Here we go. This is perfect right here. Let's go ahead and open this up in a new tab so we can zoom in. But here's what we have for the ocean heat content right here. What you're starting to notice here is more OHC starting to bubble up in the Western Gulf, in the loop current, as well as in the Western Caribbean as well, that you're going to want to pay attention to. If we actually can go ahead and go back to about a week beforehand, just going back to the history. Okay, that's not that history. Going back to the history of the OHC and all of that, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're potentially looking at right here. This is the North Atlantic. Perfect. Let's go ahead and go back to about a week ago, just to kind of give you an idea of what we were looking at and just to kind of show you the change as to what we're seeing. So let's go ahead and go back to May 28th. Right here, open link in new tab. Here's what we had on May 28th. We had more isolated pockets of over 100 OHC in a lot of these areas in the loop current, in the Caribbean, and those areas. Here's where we're at right now. Boom. More OHC pretty much everywhere. You're seeing more pockets of those 100 plus OHC areas. You're also seeing the loop current more concentrated. The Gulf, what I'm noticing, especially in the Western Gulf, has really turned up over the last few days or so. We're looking at, before we were looking at like areas cracking 50, 60 OHC. Now we're seeing areas over 80 OHC and a lot more 50s that are starting to come up and return. Also noticing the OHC is starting to increase further and further to the north into much of the main development region as well. That's what you're going to want to see for hurricane season. Also more OHC along the Gulf Stream as well. That's what's going to continue and you're going to continue to see more and more and more and more of these blues, these light blues, these more the dark blues rather retreat, and more the light blues start to move further to the north towards the subtropics. You're going to start seeing more of the green, which is the 50 OHC, moving closer to the subtropics and really blow up in the Gulf region right here. Basically, that heat dome that we had over there for a couple of weeks really allowed for OHC to really happen, and really allowed for the waters to warm up, and allowed for those waters to warm up deeper too. Because OHC, for those of you who do not know, and those of you who are just tuning in today on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, is basically how much water you have, and how hot the water is, and how deep down that hot water goes. That's essentially the layman's terms definition of ocean heat content. Basically, how much fuel do you have in the tank for hurricanes to intensify? That's what we're paying attention to with these maps right here. So that's once again something we're gonna have to pay attention to right here. So that's OHC. Let's go ahead now and take a look at the SST. Let's go ahead and take a look at the SST anomalies just to see how much above average and how much below average we're looking at right now. So here's what we have going on. We're seeing below average in some parts of the northern MDR, above average in the southern parts of the MDR, as well as an increase of above average in the eastern part of it. Noise over here, noise in the eastern Caribbean, more above average in the Gulf. In northwestern Caribbean, going to want to pay attention to it. But this is a setup I do not particularly like, because what that does is it helps tighten the gradient between the MDR and the subtropics, and it allows for that tropical development and more storms to be concentrated further to the south in those warm waters. And that's kind of one less fail mode that you have for the season. 2024 actually had quite a few red flags that we didn't catch until it was too late. We had obviously the Sahara dust was one of them, but also you kind of just had above average water temperatures all over the place instead of above average temperatures in concentrated areas. Warm water all over the place may seem like, oh my goodness, everything's going to blow up, everything's going to be bad. But what that does is it weakens that gradient, and it allows for less organized and less concentrated areas for development, and that's ultimately why we didn't see stuff turn out after Beryl for quite a while. That was part of it. Also, the Gulf of Maine was warmer than average as well, which was another one of those fail modes. We also had a PNA that was around neutral. Now we have a negative PNA, which is going to drive more of these systems into these warmer waters, into the Caribbean, into the Gulf, that we're going to want to pay attention to as well. But ultimately, this is a map I do not like right here for those climatological reasons. Now let's go ahead and show you some wind shear. We're going to show you both current and forecasted wind shear right now. Here's the current wind shear we have right now. We have, as you can see, we have a few pockets of low wind shear that are going to be interesting to watch, but generally you have a pretty bad wind shear across the Caribbean, the Gulf, and those areas. That's what's going to limit the tropical development the most. That and the Sahara air that is currently moving through parts of Florida and the South. I know that's a huge news hotline right there. That and the Canadian wildfires. I've been paying very close attention to that because I've been kind of affected by those wildfire smoke as well. I hope the Sahara dust stays away from here. I would really like to stay away from that. But ultimately, what you have going on is you have some pockets of low wind shear. Well, I want to check the anomalies first, and then get to the forecasted shear. So here's what we have with the shear anomalies for you. Here's what we have. We're looking at lower wind shear than average in the not in the Caribbean, but in the Gulf and in the north western Atlantic right here as well. Then as you go to the next time zone, you start to see those that above average start to take over again. But look at what we're noticing right here. I want to go ahead now and zoom out to the North Atlantic. Take a look at this. The MDR is now showing signals of below average wind shear. That is not a good sign. That's pretty good if you want tropical development in May. And that, coupled with a much more with a better MJO setup, could be so a few early indicators that something big might be potentially happening. Not big in terms of like hurricane or anything like that, but big as in the first named system. And then you have a few pockets of below average wind shear overall, these are some interesting signs that you're going to want to pay attention to, and we'll continue to keep you updated on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But now let's go ahead and show you wind shear proper, just to show you what's forecast right here, looking at this right now. So basically, you're seeing unfavorable, 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 unfavorable conditions for quite some time, actually, although the MDR starts to open up quite a bit in mid-June, and if a tropical wave moves through there and the Sahara dust isn't too strong, then you could have a chance for some potential tropical development over there. I do want to check the Sahara dust before I eat my own words, though, so please bear with me. Let's go ahead and look at the relative humidity and the anomaly with that as well. So here's what we have with relative humidity. Yeah, Sahara dust is for now choking it out for right now, but as you get into around June 11th, things do potentially get a little interesting. But yeah, it looks like the Sahara dust is going to be kind of lingering over there for quite a while. Don't get me wrong, there is going to be a pretty active tropical wave. There's going to be a pretty active Sahel region. But for right now, the Sahara dust looks like it's going to be kind of slowing any development that's going to be potentially happening in the MDR down, at least for the interim right here. But I do want to check the anomalies for you right here. So here's the anomalies that we have right here. Basically, a bunch of noise in the MDR. It's a lot more moist than average in the Caribbean Sea, I will tell you that. But then you start seeing drier than average going on. But this is interesting. Okay, this is interesting. Yes, you're seeing Sahara dust over there. Yes, you're seeing all that dry air. But it looks like, according to the anomalies, we're actually looking at a moister environment than average. So we're seeing below average shear, above average moisture, and the MJO is starting to act a lot more favorable for parts of the Atlantic. This is actually going to be a time frame that we're going to want to pay very close attention to, ladies and gentlemen. And before I get any comments, please disregard what the GFS is showing that run and all of that. We're not going to be talking about individual storms in this. We're mainly going to be talking about kind of conditions as to, and give a time frame as to when the first development could possibly happen. But ultimately, the MDR is one area you're going to want to pay attention to, in part because of the ITCZ, and in part because you're looking at more moisture than average over in that region compared to what we were seeing previously. So that's going to be something you're going to want to pay attention to. Yes, there's a lot of Sahara dust, but there's actually going to be less than average. And if anything does pop up over there, now that time frame, mid to late June, would be a good time for that to happen. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the moisture. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and show you the GFS ensemble right here. Shift to our global, go to our global area right here, and then we're going to go ahead and go to 200 millibar anomalies right here. 200 millibar, not the U winds, but there we go. There we go. Perfect. We can even show this as well right here. Looking at this, you're looking at upper more divergence aloft in the Western Atlantic around the same time that you're seeing this higher moisture content than average across parts of the main development region. So what you're going to look at is pretty interesting time frame, ladies and gentlemen, that you're going to want to pay attention to. You're looking at more divergence than average, and then you have slightly more, and then it kind of becomes more noisy as the time continues to go on, as the MJO starts to decrease in intensity. But you're looking at a few things here that do indicate that tropical development might be going on a little bit earlier than maybe some people are saying, like mid to late June. That's what I'm thinking is going to it's going to happen. We get our first named storm. That's what I'm thinking is it for right now, based on these parameters. We're looking at better conditions than average in a lot of regions, but there is also one area I want to pay attention to, and this is because the European ensembles are tracking this right here. So here's the European ensembles for you, ladies and gentlemen. Just moving this over for you guys. So let's go ahead and show you this. This is the 0Z ensemble run right here. We're seeing a few areas of ensembles being tagged in the Western Gulf region around the Bay of Campeche. This isn't the GFS or anything like that. This is actually the Euro, and this is 10 days out, and they expect this to start developing about 7 to 8 days out, according to this 0Z run. I'm going to check to see if we have the 12Z in yet. I don't think we I don't think we have the whole thing in. This is actually, okay, this is from yesterday's run. Even yesterday's run was showing this as well. So there is a little bit of consistency for this. I'm hoping we can get the 12Z in later, so that way we can kind of get a consistent trend with this right here, because if it's the European ensembles that are picking up on this, I am paying way more attention to that than the GFS ensembles, mainly because the GFS has been very bad with initialization this year. It kind of took a downturn from last year, which is a bit surprising for me, but at the same time, I do hope the GFS gets their shit together and we can get more forecasts and more accurate forecasts from the GFS going forward, and we'll continue to update you on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to hang out with us at Storms United, you want to ask us questions or join our tropical team, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.